Okay, thank you all for coming. I'm here today with Health Minister Brad Hazzard, our Chief Health Officer Dr. Chant, Deputy Secretary of Health Susan Pearce on what is an important day for our state, as obviously further restrictions are being released in New South Wales. Importantly though, I want to thank the people of our great state for the efforts that they have all made in going out and being vaccinated, and importantly the testing. Today, over the last 24 hours, we've seen over 100,000 tests here in New South Wales. I have complete confidence in our health system and complete confidence in the people of our great state to keep our people safe during this next journey of the pandemic. As we've said from the outset, vaccination has been the key for us to being able to open up safely. We've always said as we've opened up, as mobility increases, case numbers will increase. Case numbers alone are not the only important factor. What is important is our hospitalisations and ICU presentations. And today, I think in the last 24 hours, we've seen 24 ICU presentations there are currently 24 people in ICU across New South Wales, and that is a positive thing. And if we continue to look after each other, look out for each other, be cautious in indoor settings, keep those principles of socially distancing, then we will ensure that we keep that hospitalisation rate down and that ICU presentation rate down too. I want to make a point continuing to encourage people across the state to get that booster shot. We've made that very, very clear, and it's incredibly, incredibly important. And I want to thank everybody who has gone out right across our state to get that booster shot. You can have that booster, that third vaccination, at your GP, your pharmacist, and in addition to that, obviously at our vaccination centres at Homebush and Granville. We've seen many, many people do that. That's incredibly important. I continue to push the point in respect of boosters because what we're seeing is that they are important, particularly against this new variant. So if people can continue to make that effort, that will ensure that we can keep people safe as we move through. The other important change today is a small change in relation to close contacts. In the definition around that will be mainly focused in respect of households. So if you're deemed to be a household contact, a close contact would be generally a member from your household, but Kerry will go into further detail in relation to that because there may be occasions where health may determine outside of that definition that you would be a close contact. In those circumstances, rather than having to isolate for 7 days, you'll just need to get a negative PCR test. So I want to once again end by thanking everybody across the state. We never believed that we'd be able to get to a vaccination rate that is close to 95%. The government has done what the government has had to do. Some of the decisions we've made have been unpopular. I accept that. But I can say that everything that we have done has been focused on keeping people safe, keeping the economy open, and keeping people in work. But the efforts that everybody has made around our state to get vaccinated, particularly want to urge those people who have had one dose of the vaccination and have not gone back for your second dose vaccination, please do so. We are seeing the uptick in cases. That should be a reminder to us all, in order to keep people safe, in order to put downward pressure on the hospital system here in New South Wales, in order to put downward pressure on ICU presentations, please go out and get that second shot. And if you're eligible for that booster, we've seen that the TAGI's come out, TGA's come out, and so we're moving that period from 6 months to 5 months. So there'll be many more people now across New South Wales who are eligible for that booster shot. Please go out and do it. That has been the key to us being opening up as quickly but as safely as possible. So I can't reiterate that enough. But if you haven't received your second dose, please do so. And if you're eligible for your booster, which is now 5 months after your second dose, please go and do it. I'm now going to pass to Minister Hazzard, who will reiterate some of the health messages. Then Dr. Kerry Chant will give an update in terms of new cases and areas of concern. And then Susan Pearce will speak to a range of matters, but particularly as well the importance of vaccination and booster shots to keep us safe. Brad?
I think it's fair to say that almost 2 years since our first cases of the coronavirus in New South Wales, most people would be familiar with the concept of the major concern that we've always had is whether or not our health system would be able to cope with the increased number of patients coming into our hospitals and coming into our intensive care units. The New South Wales government has done a lot of work to make sure that our ICUs are very capable, our intensive care units are very capable, our hospitals are very capable. Well, I want to thank, as Health Minister, I want to thank all the health staff who continue, despite the load that they've borne for 2 years, they continue to look after us, and they will continue to look after us. Our hospital system is well equipped to look after what may come. But I would like to also stress that we are facing the reality of a reproductive rate of this virus at being more than 1.5. Now, most of the community would know from many conversations we've had with them that we try to keep the reproduction rate below 1 because that generally means a declining number of cases of the coronavirus, whether it be Delta, whether it be Omicron. What we are seeing now is a very substantial increase in the coronavirus, the current variant, Omicron and Delta, and we're seeing every 2 to 3 days currently we're seeing a big increase, in fact a doubling. Every 2 to 3 days we're seeing a doubling of the number of people who are actually getting the virus. We therefore are on alert and cautious. I think the community needs to be aware of that, but also to understand that we're trying to make sure that we normalise as far as is possible in a one in 100 year pandemic the way we live our lives. And our government is going to strike and continue to strike that balance. But at the end of the day, prior to COVID, we all took individual responsibilities for ourselves and for our health, and now is the time for each of us to realise that is what we must do if we want normality. So, my strong advice to the community is, as we see these numbers increasing, and I remind the community it was only last Monday fortnight that we had 180 COVID cases. Today we have 1,360 cases. Now that tells us each of us have a responsibility to look after ourselves, our family, our friends. The one thing that we know about this, well, the one thing that it would appear to be likely with the Omicron variant is that the vaccines are not stopping transmission. The transmission appears to be quite high. We've seen that happening in Newcastle out of one rather crowded party at a nightclub, and it may well be spreading across New South Wales as we stand here talking about it, all these young people who've no doubt out and about. But what we do know is that it would appear on the early evidence here in New South Wales, and certainly from South Africa and the United Kingdom, it would appear that the severity of illness is not as bad as it was with previous variants of the coronavirus. Now that's a really, really important message that every single one of us should understand. So for those who have had the 2 shots, the first 2 jabs, my strong message is, if you're eligible for the booster, go and get it as soon as possible, because it may not stop you getting the virus, but it will stop you ending up getting very ill on our early evidence, and that is crucial. I would also say that each and every one of us have a responsibility to get that message across to all of our friends. We know that there are a small percentage, around about 5% in our state, who have chosen largely to not get vaccinated. My message to all of those people is, have a rethink. Please have a rethink, because getting vaccinated may well save your life, and it may save your family's life. If you don't care about yourself, if you bring the virus home to your aunt, your uncle, your children, your grandparents, you may be the person responsible for seeing that person get quite ill. So please go and get vaccinated. There are people with immunodeficiencies, people who don't recognise the particular frailties that they have, and they may be in your family, and you may be responsible for your inactivity in vaccination may lead to their very serious illness and possibly even death. I'd also add this, back to normality is great, but gee whiz, we've got Christmas coming up. If you don't need right now to be in a jammed in, packed in environment with no windows and nothing happening except music thumping, well, maybe it's not a good time if you want to have a Christmas day. My strong suggestion there would be go quietly amid the noise and the haste, and just take a little bit of a time out and enjoy Christmas with less people on, perhaps on Christmas Day, and preferably outside, but certainly with the windows open. Just be cautious. If you are caught in an environment where you're inside and there are a lot of people, and obviously at the moment Christmas shopping, I tried to do some last weekend, it's pretty busy. So wear a mask. As of today, it may not be legally required, but for you and for many it would be very sensible to actually wear a mask. Just again, personal responsibility. And as we move forward, I should also just say this. On the simple maths of 1.5 or thereabouts of the reproductive rate, it is concerning that the simple maths is being looked at by the Epidemiology Public Health Unit at the University of New South Wales, and what they're telling us is that by the end of January we could be looking at 25,000 cases of the virus every single day. So that takes us, on my maths, to about 175,000 in a week. That's one big difference from 1,360 today, which already is a cause for concern. So as we go forward, if that is the maths, and it's a lot of work to do on that maths, and the inputs to those sort of mathematical equations, the algorithms that apply are always difficult. A lot of the work that goes into that algorithm has been done from the UK and from South Africa, which aren't exactly analogous. We know that. And I'd remind everybody that I think it was in our first year, we had similar modelling that I've talked about publicly that told us we'd have 25,000 deaths in the first year. But because the community came out and responded, because they actually wore masks, because we all kept the 1.5 metre social distance, because we actually did all that we were asked to do by public health, we managed to keep those deaths down considerably. So nowhere near 25,000. So we may not get to 25,000 new cases every day, but we could. And so precautionary principle to me as the Health Minister, and my advice to the community is do all the things that you know keep us safe. Stay outside if you can, wear those masks, get tested if you've got any viral symptoms at all, and just be careful about yourself but also the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And can I just echo some of the Minister's comments? We have seen a rapid uptick in cases, and what we believe is that Omicron is driving that uptick. A little bit of it's driven by Delta as we get out and about and we socialise. We were seeing that uptick in cases, but primarily we believe that Omicron is certainly driving the uptick in cases, particularly in Newcastle area. We've had a number of super spreading events, and what it's highlighted is what we know internationally about Omicron is its increased transmissibility. What we don't know yet is clinical severity. Everyone is working together to get the best information we've got across the world to understand the clinical severity. And that's going to be a key component. But we do know that boosters are critical in getting that immune response, because the current virus does seem to evade your immune system, both when you've had previous strains of the virus and also vaccination. So it does escape the immune system, and that is why we are seeing that is contributing to Omicron's growth and the R effective being so high with Omicron. I think the Minister's given such wise advice, and all I can do is echo it. I would urge everyone to continue to wear masks in indoor environments. It's a small price to pay. I know that it can fog up glasses, and I can know it can be annoying, but it's a very tiny act, and you're actually protecting yourself, but more importantly, you're protecting others. Just remind you that you often don't know you've got COVID and you're infectious. Remember, you're infectious before you even get symptoms. Sometimes people can have such mild symptoms, so that simple action is really very much a community-minded action, and I would urge us to continue to wear those masks in indoor settings. Secondly, just at this time, think about the sort of nature of settings you choose for your functions. Picnics, outdoor cafes. We've got a beautiful environment now that it's stopped raining. So use those settings, they're much lower risk. Also, we do want to preserve Christmas. I know many people have had their Christmas plans interrupted, and this might be the first time that people are able to reunite across state borders or boundaries. So please, just limit your activities and your social networks and your interactions. Be safe in that time so we can keep those special occasions not impacted by COVID. I would also like to acknowledge the community's response to testing. And thank you very much. Continue to come out for testing. It is important, though, that you do follow the public health advice. We are now moving to very light touch contact tracing with the case numbers we've got and the case numbers we expect. We know the greatest risk that people will have will be household contacts. The other group that we'll focus on is what we call in health household-like contacts. And they're, for instance, partners or boyfriends that sleep over, or boyfriends, girlfriends, people that sleep over, or people that you've spent, several hours at a nightclub vigorously dancing with. There'll be a few people that we, in addition to those household contacts, identify as very high risk of transmission. And then there'll be times where we have, for instance, like the nightclub in Newcastle, where it's pretty evident pretty quickly that that was a super spreader event. So we immediately alerted people to make sure that everyone was aware of that risk. One of the things that we're trying to stop is people going into aged care settings and vulnerable settings, like disability homes, our healthcare facilities. And so we will be really continuing to have mask wearing in those high-risk settings and ask people to be very cautious about those settings. And as I said, if you can do your visits outdoors, that's always the safest place. So just wanted to acknowledge that we are in a time where we're expecting to see escalating case numbers increase. We still don't have enough information to inform our assessment about the severity profile, but we believe that that information will be emerging over the next 2 weeks, particularly from the UK, our own experience, and also from countries like Denmark, and clearly we're also monitoring the situation in South Africa. But what the steps you can fundamentally take is keep yourself safe, get tested if you've got any symptoms, realise that your risk of coming across Omicron is going to be very high and increasing. So make those decisions for yourself. Get a booster. I can't stress that. Please get a booster. We know that third dose will really elevate your immune protection, and you need that with Omicron. And otherwise, just make those personal decisions and take those personal decisions wisely. Thank you.
Kerry, what?
Thank you. Just with respect, everybody's mentioned boosters this morning, and we know that New South Wales Health during the course of this year was able to step up and do huge numbers of vaccinations. I'll remind you all that during the Delta outbreak, New South Wales Health gave more vaccines in 1 week than any other state. We know that we have a job ahead of us now, along with our pharmacy and GP colleagues, to get this booster rollout happening. Earlier this week, we sent out hundreds of thousands of text messages to people who'd had their vaccinations with us, to remind them that the 5-month period and the interval, their boosters were now ready, and we have seen an amazingly strong response to that message. Just yesterday, we did over 9,000 boosters in a day. That is a very, very significant increase to what we were doing this time last week, where it was around 2,000 a day. So once again, we see our community respond, and it is the community that we rely on and have always to do the right thing and to work with us as we manage through this period. The Premier's touched on the issue of second doses. Please, if you've had your first dose, that is not sufficient. You need the second dose and you will need the booster. So while there's only a small gap between those two numbers, we still need to close it. We are creeping up to 95% first dose in our adult population. We're looking forward to the 5 to 11-year-old rollout starting on the 10th of January. We will be ready for that, but we will be working as a system as we've always done, along with the GPs and pharmacies.
Dr. Chant, can you just clarify on the closed case issue? So it'll be household contacts of COVID cases, household-like contacts of people that you spend dancing with at a nightclub?
Well, it would be more around immediate partners that don't live in the household but have household-like contacts. So it'll be a very small group, because as we get to numbers, I just want to be clear to the community, as we get to the numbers that are predicted to escalate quite rapidly, what we will be doing is sending you a text to say that you've got a confirmed case. You should have got initially your advice from the pathology company, who usually does text you. We will then send you some advice. And we'll be also interested in whether you've worked in an aged care facility, an Aboriginal, some high-risk settings. We'll capture that information, but we're going to have to do this in a very automated way. We will be asking for your household contacts and making sure they're advised. And if able, we'll be asking you to reach out to your social contacts to alert them to just get a test. But there might be some other people that are particularly vulnerable that you spend a lot of time with that we'll want to reach out to.
And just on that, they'll still be 7 days, right? What about all the people that have been close contacted, then close contacts over the past couple of days? I know you mentioned that Argyle House nightclubs is a special situation for the super spreader, but what about all these other people that have been told that they're close contacts?
There's actually very...
Can they get out, like the footballers? Can they get out now that you've changed?
We will reassess what we've done depending on the latest advice in relation to whether there's been transmission at those events. But yes, people will be permitted free once they've had their test, depending on their status. But there are a number of venues where we're actually expecting high-risk transmission. So I will go back to the team to make sure whether we've got a good communication strategy around that. But I would just hasten the fact that we know that there are multiple venues where there's super spreaders. So, for instance, in another function, almost a third of attendees have come back positive.
Was that in Newcastle?
Yes, that's in Newcastle.
What was the venue?
It was a graduation ball, and in another context. So what I'm trying to say is we've got to rapidly assess those ones and make sure that those very high-risk people, because what we're trying to do is make sure that people don't unknowingly go to work or sensitive settings and spread it.
But if people are watching this now or listening to this and they're considered a close contact, do they have to isolate for 7 days?
I would suggest that...
How will they know?
They will know because we have increasingly only had very, very limited close contacts. To meet the bar of a close contact, you've had to reach a fairly high bar, okay? So we have not been doing casual, like light touch contacts. So anyone who has been a...
Hang on, that's not necessarily true because we had a function at the ICC on Friday night where the PM was in attendance. There was 1,000 people there, one person with COVID, everyone was fully vaccinated, yet they all had to go into isolation until they had a negative test. Now, we're meant to be living with COVID like this.
Yeah, certainly. So look, all I can say is we are streamlining the procedures. I'm telling you from now, and we will certainly provide advice. There are just a couple of people associated, a couple of close contacts in venues where there's been high transmission events where I would just like to make sure that we provide precise advice for which of those venues where we've got high transmission.
Like the rugby league players, they were considered close contacts. They're in 7 days isolation. There has not appeared to be any spread.
So, of course, they will be tested and released. So we will be working to do that. All I'm just saying is this decision's been made.
And one
now
more, if I could. Everyone who's spoken here said wear a mask. Why did we wind back that restriction today when you're all saying everyone should wear a mask?
I'm providing the public health advice, which is masks are an effective mitigant, whether it's Omicron, Delta or the next variant.
But why are we telling people to take them off?
Because we're asking people to take personal responsibility. That's a matter for government in setting those mandates. And all I'm saying is from public health position, I am strongly recommending we keep masks and asking the community to do so.
How many...
would you prefer that everybody wears masks in the city?
My clear advice is in indoor settings, people should be wearing masks. I feel personally that it's a small impost and it does reduce the risk. I think it will give a lot of people comfort as they move around. I was actually in the city on the weekend and it's pleasing to see. It was very buoyant, bustling, and let me tell you, being socially distanced at all times was different.
Do you know how many people are
concerned
currently
about
in
the escalation of cases or is this suspected?
I think Omicron we knew had increased transmissibility. I think what we've seen is some really what we're doing is mirroring what the experience is in UK, South Africa, where we saw such a rapid uptick in cases. I suppose we always didn't know how it would pan out with our high vaccination coverage and also in summer. But we certainly have seen multiple super spreading events. So some venues have had, for instance, an attack rate of about 30%. So even at the nightclub, in excess of 30% of the people at that nightclub have tested positive.
Do you know how many people are currently in isolation at the moment across the state and how many people would actually be having to isolate over the Christmas break?
I think the issue about isolating over the Christmas break will be in everyone's hands. I think we've given some really wise guidance today about minimising the sorts of activities that will increase your risk of exposure. I would like to say, if you are a case of COVID, if you've got COVID, you are infectious. It would actually be very inappropriate to go and attend any functions or do anything other than isolate. It's not necessarily going to be a mild disease for everyone, and I think we do want people to act responsibly.
How many close contacts have we seen, or how many close contacts are in isolation?
I don't have that number before me, but I would imagine that given we've seen a number of large events that we've called close contacts, there would be a large number of individuals. As I said, these changes will mean that less people will be captured, and it will be a milder impact on people. But I'm just also being very transparent that there will be circumstances that public health, when we do see these big transmission events, we will call those venues close contacts, and we are asking the community to bear with us for that, because the only thing we get concerned about in those circumstances particularly is that the attendees at those functions are often people that might be going the next day into an aged care facility. They might be going the next day to provide care in a healthcare facility. So we do want to make sure that we minimise the transmission and exposure in those vulnerable settings.
Premier, just more from you, if I could, Premier, if I could just ask you a question about these large numbers of people that are in isolation at the moment.
Yeah.
You yourself say that we have to live with COVID.
Yeah.
How is that when we've got thousands of people that could potentially go into isolation over Christmas with the current rules that we have, considering how many Christmas parties there are, even if they're fully vaccinated?
Well, it's very clear that the purpose of the change today is to ensure that we reduce the definition or the capture of those people as close contacts. And as Dr. Chant has set out, from this point forward, a close contact will be defined as somebody who is in the household or somebody who is often in the household, so a partner of someone, or in addition to that, a circumstance which health deems to be a high risk circumstance. So that will reduce the amount of people in isolation for that 7-day period, so that they will only need to only be required to have a negative PCR test. It's sensible. It's not that complicated. We'll continue to work very closely with health. We'll work through those people who are currently in isolation, and for those people who don't fall within this change, then they will just simply need a negative PCR test, and that is a sensible approach in the circumstances. The other point I want to make, which was remiss of me not to mention earlier, and that was in relation to the rules that are still in place. In circumstances where you do have COVID and you're required to be in isolation, or you are deemed to be a close contact and are required to be in isolation, those rules aren't there for the sake of it. There are substantial penalties in place. We want to make sure that we continue to put downward pressure on the hospital system, hospitalisations and ICU presentations. The best way of doing that is taking personal responsibility but following the rules that are in place. We aren't putting these rules in for the sake of it. We are learning to the question to live alongside the virus. Yes, case numbers are increasing. Case numbers would as we opened up our state. Ultimately, the key to that has been vaccination. And for those people who are vaccinated, we want to reduce the capture of people who would generally, under the past circumstance, be required to be defined as a close contact. And I think it's pretty clear. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you concerned by that modelling, and is that what living with COVID looks like, and we will be living with 25,000 cases a day potentially?
Look, we've seen a number of models over the course of the pandemic. What the Health Ministry has clearly pointed to is if you're looking at a doubling of cases between every 2 and 3 days, then we will see a substantial increase in cases. I know the media wants to lead on cases. Please also report this evening on the ICU numbers, on the hospital presentations. They are just as important. I have confidence in our health system, complete confidence. We've invested record amounts. I know that our health system in New South Wales is stronger than any of the other states. That is the reason, while through the entire pandemic, we have been able to open up more than other states. That is the reason why other states have closed their borders. We trust our health system here in New South Wales because we have invested record amounts in it. Also, I have complete confidence not just in our health system, but in the great people of New South Wales, the record testing, the record vaccination rate that we have in our state, and now boosters. And if everyone can continue to go and get boosters, then yes, as case numbers will increase, and they will increase, they'll increase tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. We need to learn to live alongside the virus. I want to instill confidence in our people that we can do that. And if you look at the ICU presentations, there are 24 across our state.
Have you ruled out putting in place tighter restrictions in coming weeks if cases really skyrocket in line with the worst model?
As I've said, we will always tailor our settings to the circumstances we find ourselves in. We, as part of the federal, the Doherty Institute's work, we've always said from time to time, if we believe as a government there will be substantial pressure on our health system, then we will tailor our settings accordingly.
And
now that could be.
Would that be somewhere where you might consider it?
Once again, the question is focused on the case numbers. Let's move the thinking. Please, in the media, can we please shift the thinking on the news tonight? Can we please shift the thinking from the case numbers to ICU presentations and hospitalisations? That is the most important key.
Premier, you're saying that, but minutes ago, your health minister said we're going to get to 25,000 cases a day potentially by January.
Yeah.
Minister Hazzard's telling people not to go night clubbing if they want to have Christmas. Dr. Chant telling us to go mobility given their masks and time. The same day that restrictions are easing across the board, including the unvaccinated people.
Yes.
Aren't you sending a completely contradictory message?
We're not. What we're saying today is we're learning to live alongside the virus. Vaccination has been key to that. The key message today for the people of New South Wales is thank you for the efforts that you've made. In addition to that, please continue to take personal responsibility. Personal responsibility is key. Currently, we still have rules in place. If you do get COVID, you have to isolate for 10 to 14 days. No one wants to isolate over the Christmas period. So take personal responsibility. Socially. Hold on. I'll finish. Take personal responsibility, socially distance, follow the rules that are in place. There are always going to be challenges coming our way. No country around the world is immune from COVID. Case numbers will increase. I've sat in every press conference since becoming...
locked down. If you want to celebrate Christmas, basically lock yourself down until you get to Christmas.
Not at all.
What is it?
I mean, if you look, what this is about today is as we open up, we're opening up safely. We have said from the outset, for the last 60 odd days as I've been Premier, I have said, as we open up, as mobility increases, case numbers will increase. The best way we can protect ourselves and our family is to be vaccinated and get a booster shot. That's exactly what everybody across our state has done in record numbers. We had over 100,000 people get tested yesterday. We had over 9,000 people go out and get their booster shot. Those increased case numbers today should just be a reminder to us. The pandemic is not over. We're learning to live alongside it. We've opened up our economy. We've opened up our businesses. As Dr. Chant has said, look, I mean, be outside as much as possible. Enjoy the best that New South Wales has to offer, but do it safely. And it's great. And it's great to see. And it's great to see. It's great to see life returning to our city. It's great to see life returning to our state. But please, it's all about instilling confidence and ensuring that everyone has a safe Christmas.
So why didn't you keep that rule in place and keep masks mandatory?
Rules are mandatory in high-risk settings. We've maintained that, and we're highly recommending continued use of masks, particularly in circumstances where it's difficult to socially distance. And as we head into this Christmas period, we know that the shops, and many people have put their shopping off. It's good to see that Brad was out last week, but many people have put their shopping off until the last week as Christmas falls on a Saturday. There's no doubt shopping centres will be busier. We just say, please take personal responsibility. We recommend masks. We've taken the advice into account. It's always a balance in terms of the approach the government takes, and that's the decision we've made.
There is no doubt that the hospitalisation numbers only come about weeks after the case numbers start to rise. And in Victoria, the hospitalisation numbers are starting to rise, and there might be further restrictions. Don't you acknowledge that we'll only be able to get a real grasp on those hospitalisation numbers in a month? And so if they start to rise, what do you do?
As I said, as the circumstances change, if there is a situation where we believe there is substantial pressure on our health system, on our ICU presentations, we will tailor our response accordingly. It's for me to look at the evidence that comes before us, not to preempt what may or may not happen.
If we're hitting 25,000 cases a day by late January, that stands to reason that we may have, I don't know, the whole state potentially infected by the later part of the year. Do you acknowledge that we'll probably all catch COVID now?
What stands to, we've always said, as we open up and we learn to live alongside the virus, many people across this state will get COVID. We've always said that. We've said that from the outset. Simply receiving a vaccination does not mean you won't get COVID. I mean, what we've said, and surely the media should be aware of this, what vaccination does, what booster shots do, does not prevent you from contracting COVID. It minimises your symptoms. It ensures that you don't get seriously ill. That's why we have said, and the people of New South Wales have responded so well in going out and getting vaccinated. Now, we will always tailor our responses, as I've said numerous times, to the circumstance that we find ourselves in. But ultimately today, we sit here in our state with a very strong health system that I have complete confidence in, and I have complete confidence in our people who are doing the right thing and getting tested, getting vaccinated and getting that booster shot.
Minister Hazzard, a question. Minister Hazzard, a question.
Pleasure. It is hot out here. Yeah. Just ask if we could just keep this to the bare essentials now, because it is extremely hot out here. So Dr. Chant had to take a jacket off, and the rest of us aren't feeling good. And you're not looking too good either, James. So,
James has got the umbrella.
Please share the umbrella with James, please. Everybody else is looking like they're cooked.
So yesterday you made pretty serious allegations about the start of the Argyle House and Nightclub. Trustee suggested that...
Allegations?
Yes, that someone who attended may have been told by health to isolate and breach those rules. Mm-hmm. So this was linked to the vote party on the 3rd.
On the 3rd of December,
when
yes.
was this person told they were a close contact and needed to isolate?
I can't give you those details. What I can tell you is what I said yesterday, and you obviously heard that, because I saw you reported it today.
Because, Minister, if he wasn't told there was a close contact, then he wouldn't be breaking the rules.
Well, if he isn't, then the investigation will find him not liable. But if he did, then it's unfortunate that he might be liable.
Do you have evidence that he was told?
Sorry?
Do you have evidence that he was told?
As I said, that's a matter for health, and I'm not the police. Last I looked, I have the portfolio of trying to keep people safe and health, and I'll stick with that. Do you have one more?
Last one.
So I just missed the first part, sorry.
Omicron is responsible for the large uptick in cases. It was 25 in the last day of the 1,300 Omicron. Is that because it takes a number of days to recognise that they are?
Yeah, I think, look, I'll ask Dr. Chant to expand on that, but I think part of the problem is that a lot of the equipment that's used around the world is not able to immediately identify the Omicron variant. It can recognise it as a coronavirus, and what it generally will show, not all of it, but most of it will show there's been what's called an S gene dropout, and that's an indicator that it's likely to be Omicron. But anyway, I'll ask the world's expert on such matters, Dr. Chant.
So look, basically the gold standard for determining which variant it is a PCR test. But when you've got this number of cases, you can't actually do timely PCR tests. We know that in the main, there's this thing called the S gene dropout that the Minister described. Laboratories across the state use different machines that test for multiple targets on the virus. And a few of them test for what's called an S gene as well as a couple of other genes. Now, one company in particular has got that test, and so we know that the tests coming through from that company come in and tell us that they're S gene dropouts. We know that in Newcastle, a lot of the vast majority of the cases, if not all, have been S gene dropout, associated with S gene dropout. So we know that there was at least someone at the Argyle nightclub also has got a confirmed Omicron sequence. So just to be clear, going ahead, we will have to rely on this S gene dropout to give us this indication as Omicron sweep. We believe that Omicron will probably take over from Delta as the dominant type or we may actually see Delta and Omicron transmitting. So we just don't know. Overseas, they're probably seeing one surpass the other. But that's why the numbers are not what we're reporting as those that are confirmed cases, but what the data I'm seeing is an uptick in the S gene dropout proportion of cases in Sydney, where there's S gene dropout, and then in Newcastle, the predominance of S gene dropout
So do you
cases.
think most of the cases up there were
So I think
Omicron?
most of the cases up in Newcastle are driven by the Omicron.
Yeah.
And Dr. Chant, we're told to focus on the hospitalisation, but given that we don't yet know, as you said, the severity of this, how do we know that hospitalisations aren't going to increase with this exponential rise in cases?
So it also is a numbers game. So even if the disease, that we don't yet know the disease severity, but even as case numbers rise, even if you've got a very milder disease, it still will lead to hospitalisations and ICU. We've got to gather that information because that's a really key point that we really need to understand the clinical severity. And we need to understand what it looks like in elderly people, what it looks like in people that have got underlying health conditions, to actually inform what are the best strategies we can put in place to protect them. But can I just say one single thing we know works, or is on the best available evidence at this point in time, is boosters. And I've seen even this morning some additional data coming in which really emphasises the urgency. So I would recommend that instead of Christmas shopping, everyone shops for a COVID booster online or reaches out and to their partner to make them an appointment to go online for a COVID shot. And that is the best, exciting gift that can be given.
What a great way to end it. Well done. Thanks, Santa.
Nice to see you, Dr. Chant.
We probably will see him. If we don't, have a good Christmas, guys. We probably will see him.